All right, we're back. Welcome to the show. We're going to be talking about how to improve your credit report with our good friend, Mr. Sam Scott. He is an author of the book called The Credit Book. He was one of the first credit repair business in the state of Florida to be approved. Mr. Scott also has several Florida state and national approved continuing education courses that he wrote and instructed. Welcome our guest, Mr. Sam, to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Brandy. Thanks for taking the time and energy to have me out.
Yeah, so there's a ton of credit repair companies. You know, when you Google it up, it all comes up. So tell us what makes you different from the other brands out there that's been saturating the market with, credit repair services, if you will.
Brandy, it's a great question, and I wanted to make sure that anyone who's going to send their grandma to credit repair or debt settlement was going to utilize our company. We don't just send letters to credit bureaus, cross our fingers, say a prayer, hope for the best type of credit repair, or charge a monthly fee where there's a perverse incentive to drag a client out for a long period of time. We're paid for results, so if nothing comes off the credit report, the client's bill for the month is zero. But we have letters that are structured to go to over a dozen different agencies, over and above and including the credit bureaus, the subsidiary bureaus, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Office of the Comptroller, maybe state banking and finance if we file a complaint against a consumer collection license, for anything, even slightly something that's re-aged or something small where they've forgot to list the date of last activity, forgot to list the name of the original creditor. We do affidavits, we do certified mail, we do FACT Act letters when we get things off two bureaus to force and compel and mandate the third bureau to remove it. We have the correct verbiage to make that happen quickly, and a lot of unique things along those lines for the people who have a high value or a high regard for their credit.
Wow, that's great because there's a lot of companies out there, as you know, just doing credit repair. So it's nice to know that someone gets it done efficiently and they don't charge you until results happen, which is very important. So tell me, like, if I wanted to, let's say a parent and their kids are going off to school, and they wanted to co-sign for a car for them, how would that work, and how would that affect that parent's credit?
A lot of parents make a simple mistake when they co-sign for their kid. I'm not against co-signing at all, but the parent should always be the one to make the payment and have their child pay them directly each month. Not only does it hold the child more accountable and it makes them budget more and take things more seriously, but in the event it didn't happen that way and the child up in college was embarrassed and didn't make a payment for a month or two, and the parent isn't even aware that their credit is getting decimated by a few recent lates, it just creates chaos and bad feelings afterwards. So it's always good to make sure that the borrower or co-borrower, co-guarantor, who's the adult or the parent, is making the payments directly.
That's awesome. And this goes into something else that I think a lot of people go through, especially when it comes down to protecting themselves when they're going through a divorce. How would a person that's separated from their spouse and they're going through a divorce, how would they literally protect their credit moving forward during the process and after that process of divorce?
You know, these are key issues, and it's important to have a family law attorney that's not lazy. I used to be a member of the Association of Family Law Professionals, and there's a huge difference between an attorney who takes those extra measures. So let's say a couple is in the middle of a nasty divorce, and uh, one of the spouses takes the pickup truck to Indiana and decides not to make a payment every other month and screw up the other person's credit. Since the other parent or the other spouse doesn't have access to that vehicle, they don't have enjoyment, they don't have use, their attorney can file a motion with the court to have that item removed off the credit report until such time as a judgment occurs. Now, they're no longer reporting judgments, so it's even better, but most every judge will grant that if that one person doesn't have access to that vehicle or something of that nature.
Oh, that's awesome. So now, when it comes to divorce, and we're still talking in the family realm, when you have parents signing for their kids, whether it be for a car or putting them on their credit card to help them get started, or if somebody's facing a challenge when it comes to divorce. What about past business challenges? How do one really settle a debt or a judgment from some past businesses that they have done, and is currently affecting their credit?
A lot of people aren't aware that a divorce decree does not override a contract with an original creditor. So if you or I or the people watching this were to loan a couple money, were to loan them $14,000, and one of the spouses said, I don't need to pay because the judge said that my spouse has to pay, and the other spouse dies or doesn't make payments or leaves the country. No, they would just have an automatic counterclaim against the other spouse if it went to court. Because they were a guarantor, I think rule number 3 of law school is party C cannot unilaterally affect an agreement between parties A and B. If we owed our grandmother money, we can't blame that we can't pay them because the field goal kicker missed the field goal to the right, who we had money on because his girlfriend argued with him the night before. If we didn't pay our grandmother back, it's our fault. We're the ones that are liable. So when it comes to that, debt settlement is great. Now, a lot of debt can be settled for 15, 20 cents on the dollar, sometimes 10, 9, 8, 7 cents on the dollar, even with credit cards. A lot of people aren't aware of that. Depends on the pool, depends on your relationships with these different types of lenders. And medical debt, that's a whole separate story, which we can talk about later, but that can be settled for 2 cents on the dollar or less.
Oh wow! So with that regard, when you're talking about selling in debt and things of that sort, let's hypothetically, someone has a piece of property that they have, and they so suddenly forgot to pay the bill, and it went to collections. So how would one solve or dissolve that situation where it was just a simple mistake, or just simply went somewhere and they just forgot to pay the bill and it just went to collections?
Well, you mentioned a piece of property. There's 4 kinds of debt. There's secured and unsecured, and liquidated and unliquidated. Liquidated meaning everything readily calculable by the terms and conditions of the contract. Not like a medical bill where you didn't know how much the x-ray was going to cost, or how much the shot in the leg was going to cost, or how much the pill they give you was going to cost. So when you deal with, and you can't settle secured debt unless it's conditional to surrendering the property. So we can't settle secured debt for other people. We settle unsecured debt. So once that happens, if it's for real estate, obviously we have to wait until there's a sale. Now, there's some cool key issues that you could even look at this like a repossession of a vehicle or repossession, of property, force majeure, the forcing of the lien from one party to the other. But what winds up happening is, let's say the property was sold at an auction only open to dealers or a private auction, or even if in a vehicle, maybe they sold it on the dealership lot to one of the mechanic's wives at a discounted price. That doesn't mean that was the value of the vehicle. It's very difficult to determine the value of the vehicle or the value of the land because, as you know, normally they try to get you for something called a deficiency. We're in a very unique time where there were foreclosures, where the property is actually now worth more. The banks are selling it for more. There's actually a proficiency, and they're not entitled. People don't realize that. The banks aren't entitled to that extra money. You can file a claim against the bank if you find out what they sold it for. They're not allowed to be double enriched. You can actually go get money from the bank if you had a foreclosure, if you do the right investigations and the right situation occurs.
Wow. So when it comes to settling debt, and a lot of people have settled debt across the board, where in the past or using debt collection agencies or what have you. Why do banks, settle or collect debt different percentages from other people, like 20, 30, 40%, or sometimes even lower? Why is that scenario come to play when it comes to selling debt from banks?
Well, there's some basic rules and there's some complex rules. The longer you hold out, typically the better deal that you get. Even in the foreclosure, the people that were trying to work out deals in the beginning never got their money back. So they're not going to start off at 20% or 15%. They're going to start off at 80, 70, 60, 50%, and they're going to come down only so much. But depending on the situation, like even with the vehicles, if we make a demand for the 14-day letter of redemption to repurchase the vehicle before it goes for auction and for them to produce it, if we ask for the location of the auction, the time and date, because if it wasn't a fair market auction value, they can't determine deficiency, certainly not in any accurate way. It would have to be determined by a court. Were there pictures beforehand? Were there pictures afterwards? A whole slew of different things come into effect. Were there aftermarket rims? Was there a high-end stereo in there? What was the no pictures? They got a problem. So some of that stuff can be settled super, super cheap. In certain situations, your hands are tied a little bit, but it depends. Like when we settle debt for clients, we have a lot of wealthy clients, and they don't care if we settle it for 15 or 30% because they want to get their credit back quicker. They want it conditional to removing it off the credit report. They want to be back in the game. They understand how valuable having superb credit is, and occasionally if the ticket item is high enough, we might recommend that they wait. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But there's always risks and rewards, but there's a lot of variables, but the main variables are time and knowledge.
This is so true. So true. So now, when it comes to different ways on kind of combat your debt or even remove certain debt or items from your credit report, how is it important and how is it really hard? Because these are the stories that a lot of people hear about removing student loans from your credit report.
Student loans are easy. There's only one problem. They have to consolidate. Now you might get a company like Earnest who doesn't report to the credit bureaus. Great place to go. You need a 660 score to get there. Now there's no trace of it. You could do an affidavit, a sworn statement that they're consolidated. If they were transferred multiple times, U.S. Department of Ed, Sally Mae, USA Funds, Nelnet, Navient, I could go on and on and on. If they've been transferred a bunch of times, that is a great argument to get all the accounts removed and all the lates removed, either way, so long as it's consolidated in good standing and you can attest to that. Now, there's risks and rewards, as I'm sure you're very, very well aware. When you consolidate with an outside company, you're going to get a 60-day forbearance if you break your leg. You're not going to get a 1-year forbearance if you break your leg. The interest rates are typically 2 points higher than you would with the government type backings. You have a few variables that come into play. It's your one get out of jail free card. And here's the cool thing if you go with a place like Earnest. They don't report, it's not going to go on your credit report until you go 90 or 120 days late. But once you do, it goes to another collection company and the bureaus are going to laugh at you if they see that on there. You're not going to get out of your jail free card. You've used it up. That's a very difficult thing to remove off the credit report at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of people even take certain, avenues to get out of debt or to consolidate their debt or to even have some of their debt forgiven. And most people use bankruptcy as that particular move. When is the good time to file for bankruptcy, and if it's a bad move when they file for bankruptcy? Tell us a little
These
bit about that.
these are superb areas to consider. And when I talk to a client, there are times that I advise bankruptcy, but I'll ask a few questions. For example, like, do you have a state license and what type of license is it? If you're a CPA, you can't file bankruptcy. If you're a certified financial planner in Florida, if you're an attorney, if you want to be able to renew your continuing education credits and keep your license, you can't do a bankruptcy. Then I'll ask this, do you have any investment properties? Oh yeah, I've got 3 homes. I've got equity. Oh, you better not do bankruptcy because the bankruptcy trustee is not going to leave that available. I'll ask another question. Do you have a personal injury case? There are people that aren't even aware of this. They file bankruptcy. They have a $200,000 personal injury case that's 2-3 years away from mediating or for settling. And all of a sudden, the bankruptcy trustee comes in and goes zoop and takes 60 grand right out of it. There are a few other factors as well. I don't want to bore your audience or take up, I know we have a limited amount of time, but if they have none of a slew of about 8 or 10 different things, and they're not making a lot of income where they're going to be stuck in a chapter 13, 20% wage earner repayment program, if they can do a chapter 7, get in and out in 3 or 4 months, absolutely home run. But again, if you want to purchase property in the next 2-3 years, if there are some other things that you're not going to be able to do with that bankruptcy on your record.
There's a lot of different ways to combat your credit or try to get it fixed, consolidated, pay down the debt, or get things removed that may be incorrect or things to get or whatever have you. Can you tell us how these different agencies come into play? Because we have so many different agencies now. We have the Equal Credit Protection Act. We have the what is it, Fair Credit Billing Act as well.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit more about certain agencies now that kind of help consumers to really combat these big credit bureaus and trying to get their credit fixed and scraping away?
Brandy, these are important questions, and I'm sure your audience is going to thank you for asking the right ones. And there's really two parts to this. On the consolidation, if you get in with a normal debt settlement company where they're going to put you in a 4 or 5 year restructured payment program, your credit's going to suck the entire time. 84% of the people that enter that program fail. They don't complete the program. So now they've got 4 or 5 years. They're being charged exorbitant fees. Exorbitant. You've got to read the fine print. Most of these companies charge, make the customer pay 59% of the total debt. 40% is designed to go to the creditors or collectors. They keep 19%. They actually keep anything settled less than 40% in their pocket. And a lot of their settlements are high, and they have to go back to the client in year 2 or 3 and ask for more money because they weren't able to settle a bunch below 40%. It's an extreme disservice to do to the client. They also throw in debt that in 3 or 4 years is going to be past 7 years. There's a lot of unethical things that are done to consumers. And even in the debt settlement program with attorneys, if you read the fine print, they will answer a lawsuit for you, but they will not defend you in the case. So you'll get representation just in answering the case. It's a very limited scope. They're not going to sit there and do admissions, interrogs, requests for production of documents. Certainly, they're not going to do depositions of the clerk of records to argue these things. And a lot of these unsecuritized asset receivables are sold on Wall Street, where they're getting doubly enriched, where people are gambling, and these banks have even been paid back. So there are a lot of things where people aren't going to take those arguments. And the next thing that you said, the Equal Credit Protection Act, the Fair Credit Billing Act, the Equal Credit Protection Act, they can't discriminate for race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, or anything of that nature. But what they can do is you could have 5 people on a credit card. You and I could be co-borrowers, co-guarantors. We could have 3 authorized users. They could report you to one bureau, me to 2 bureaus, or me to no bureaus. One of our authorized users to all 3. Anything that they want as long as they don't discriminate. So there are certain things that play in with that Equal Credit Protection Act that you can do and can't do. Now, the Fair Credit Billing Act is probably my favorite act. It only applies to credit cards. The basic premise is that you, me, John, Mary, everybody we know has the same relationship with every credit card holder. They provide us the products, the service that's reasonable and functional, bill us accurately, we pay them, and if by no reasonable fault they don't receive or collect the monies, they can assess us late fees, they can assess us penalties, but they cannot injure us on a credit report. Let's say one of your clients is in the hospital for 3 months. They can't get to their bills. They don't want anybody going through their mail. Maybe they have some crazy magazines they subscribe. Who knows, whatever reason. Can that creditor legally mark them late each month? No. Do they do it every day USA? Absolutely. Well, the banks can't check HIPAA. So when we take a look at someone's credit report, if they're late 30, 60, 90, or 30, 30, 30, we've got a good argument. Solid. If they're late 30 days in January, but on time in February and March, but then late again in April, then on time in May and June, but then late again in July, they are screwed. We can't fix that. Big problem. No point in them wasting their money, no point in wasting their time. What can they do? They can wait because after 2 years, the lates are infinitesimal in the scoring. I've seen people 730, 740, 750 with plenty of lates 3, 4, 5 years ago, and they've done everything else right in the scoring. So you have to assess each credit report one at a time to give the client the best projected future as quickly as possible.
That's all. This has been this has literally been a wealth of knowledge that a
Thank
lot
you.
of people don't share when it comes to really tackling their credit. Because there is a lot of people out there that charge a simple fee and really don't really get the results that people look for. We see the postings about removals, but it doesn't really, these are just probably old postings, right? But you really just nailed it down about simple things that people really don't like or pretty right don't want to hear about how to repair your credit or literally hire somebody to like tackle the debt for you. And that's kind of awesome. And I appreciate you for doing that. So, can you tell our audience where we can find you and get more information about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Two websites, Credit CRB is the main one, is in Charlie Robert Boy, creditcrb.com. And I have a landing page for one of my books, the credit book, that's on highcreditnodebt.com. There's a 2-minute video on how different we do the debt settlement and the type of clients that we cater to. And how quickly we get it done and things of that nature. Highcreditnodebt.com and creditcrb.com. And I appreciate you allowing me to plug those.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Sam Scott, for joining us. I appreciate you, my brother.
Listen, hopefully we'll get a chance to do a few others. I got some other great topics, and I hope your audience really gives you a strong thank you because you've been bringing out experts after experts to help all of them, and I'm sure they appreciate it greatly. And Brandy, thank you so much again for your time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, audience, next IBS.